Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're now going to hear from a different witness, I think. Is that
Yes.
right, Mr.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we're now going to hear from Daniel Meyrick.
Thank you.
If he could please be called.
Right, let's swear the witness.
Would you repeat the words for me? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meyrick. Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Meyrick. First of all, could you please give the inquiry your full name?
Daniel James Meyrick.
And can I just say first, thank you very much for coming here today to assist the investigation of the matters in our inquiry. It really is very much appreciated. My questions are intended to be short and simple. They don't always work out that way. If at any stage you don't understand the question or don't hear it, I'm very happy to repeat it or to put it in a different way. Just say.
Okay.
Similarly, if you want to sit down or at any stage you want a break, just signal and we will take a break.
Okay.
Can I ask you please to start by taking your statement, your witness statement, dated the 27th of October 2017, and that is MET *007760, and that should be in the little bundle in front of you. You also have on your desk in front of you to your right a screen on which your statement and any other documents I'm going to show you will be exhibited. And if you want also, you can look at the screens at the back of the room. It's up to you. And so when we go to a particular passage, what tends to happen is that the documents director who's in there will highlight a particular passage in yellow and we look at it close up. Have you read your statement recently?
I have.
And can you please confirm that its statements are true?
It is.
It is. And have you discussed your statement or your evidence that you're going to give today with anybody before you came here?
No.
You also have some contemporaneous notes dated the 16th of June 2017, which are at MET *005459, and we may need to look at those as well. They should also be in your file.
There's a tab B, I think, in your file, and you'll probably find the notes behind there.
Yeah.
But they'll come up on the screen as well.
Okay.
Yes, they're in fact on the screen at the moment, so if you just confirm for us that those are yours.
I haven't had the chance to review my contemporaneous notes recently.
Well, let's not take time on that now.
Yeah.
I may go back to the notes as we go. I may not. And if we go to the notes and there's anything in there that you disagree with or you want to correct, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Okay. Can I just start by asking you about your career? When did you join the London Fire Brigade?
July 2003.
And what is your present rank?
Watch manager.
Right. And as at the 13th, 14th of June, were you a watch manager?
I was.
And were you at Fulham?
I was.
Right. And what did that role involve?
I was a command support officer.
And what's that?
Command support officer rides the command unit. Command units are called to 4-pump fires and above, and special service incidents, and any incident that an incident commander would require the facilities of a command unit.
And the command unit, was that kept or held at Fulham Fire Station?
It is, yes.
Right. Now, on the call out to Grenfell Tower, you say in your statement at the bottom of page 1 that on Wednesday the 14th of June 2017, I was on duty at 1:15 a.m. when I was mobilised to a 6-pump fire along with watch manager Kentfield at Fulham Fire Station to Grenfell Tower in Kensington. Now, watch manager Kentfield, he's also, or was also, watch manager at Fulham with you.
Yes, it was the two of us riding the command unit that night.
Right. And was he also a command support officer?
Yes.
Right. And who was the senior of the two?
We're both equal. He was the designated team leader for the shift.
Right.
I was a designated driver.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that he was in charge, it's just the role that he takes for the shift and the role that I take.
Right. And how is that role distributed?
We decide between ourselves, usually alternating.
Right. Okay. And is there a station manager at Fulham that you or he or both of you report to?
Yes, there was a station manager at Fulham. The station, as a command unit, we work as a team. We work between ourselves to make the decisions, but any reporting up the chain would go to the station manager. The station manager, though, isn't command unit trained, so doesn't know the intricate details of the command unit.
I follow. And who was the station manager on duty that night?
I'm just trying to think, because we had a few changes, but I believe it was, bear with me, Jason Jones, station manager Jason Jones.
Right. Thank you. Now, you say you were mobilised to Grenfell Tower at about 1:15 a.m. or at 1:15 a.m. Did anybody else go with you apart from Watch Manager Kentfield?
No, just the two of us on the command unit.
Right. And CU8 is your command unit?
Yes.
Right. And that has normally a two-man crew?
Minimum of 2, maximum of 4.
Right. And could you just explain in very brief terms, if you can, what a command unit does?
Essentially, it supports the incident commander with the command and control of the incident. On arrival at an incident, the team leader would don their fire gear and go and liaise with the incident commander. They then agree if the command unit was to take over as the incident command pump. Even though it's not a pumping appliance, it's still referred to as an incident command pump, or ICP. On doing that, the team leader would then relay that message back to, in this case, me as the driver staying on the unit. I would then inform control that Charlie Uniform 8 had become the ICP. So all messages to control would then go through the command unit. Other things that we do, we would map an incident generally. We have 4 PCs on the command unit with various functions. We have access to brigade policies, procedures, whiteboards for noting down things. There's a downloadable link through to police helicopters, so we can get aerial views if there's a police helicopter in the area. Yeah, and various functions on the PCs themselves.
Okay. And what about a CSS, a Command Support Service?
That's the one of the computer systems.
Right. And what does that do?
Again, that can be used for mapping. And on that you can show sectorisation where not individuals are. Well, you can show where individuals are, but obviously individuals move around all the time. But certainly sectors, machines, ladders, things like that. It records all messages to control, so if you need to refer back to anything that's already been sent. There is an organisational chart which is essentially a plan of the structure of command at an incident. The monitoring officer, the incident commander, sector commanders and various operations that are taking part underneath those individuals. You can download images onto there. Sorry, I'm just trying to work my way through all the different things. There's conferencing facility to be able to exchange dialogue with other people at control. And there's the ability to record video and audio on the unit itself.
Right. And you mentioned a minute ago that the CSS would record messages sent to control.
Yes.
Would it also record messages received from control?
Yes.
And how would they come up? Would they come up on a screen? Would they?
Yes.
And the messages that were coming from control, let's say by radio transmission, would they appear on the screen, or would they have to be sent by control through a different system?
All messages to and from control type out, and it's recorded and then transmitted from there.
Right. So can you just tell me?
So sorry to interrupt, but so that can take a couple of minutes for them to type up the messages.
I see. Okay. So so control types up a message. Is that on the vision system?
From the control point of view,
Yes.
I believe it is, but I'm afraid I'm not the expert on that.
Right. And so, all right. So I'm just trying to get a feel for what the CSS system receives, but it's a typed message which comes from control, is it?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
see. Okay. And then you have, when you're sending a message back to control using the CSS, is somebody in the command unit also typing?
I don't know if we're getting across wires. All radio messages from the command unit to control will type up, and then we have access to those typed messages.
I see.
There is a separate facility for sending and receiving messages, which is very rarely used. In fact, I have never used that facility. But with you do, like I say, have access to the radio messages that have been sent.
So the CSS system, just so I've got it in my head clearly, is a system for whereby control records that the radio message which comes from the control unit.
Yes.
And they type it up and record it and send it back to you essentially as a written confirmation of the message you've sent them.
Yeah.
I follow. Do you also have, what other methods of communication does the command unit such as CU8 have with brigade control?
There's two fixed phones. There's the mobile phone. There's the main scheme radios. There's handheld radios. You can't communicate with control with that. So yeah, the main scheme radio, the fixed phones, and the mobile phone.
What about airwave? What about airwave radios?
No, airwave works as main scheme, so that's essentially the same kind of thing.
Okay. Now, does the command unit require specialist training?
Yes.
Okay. You've had specialist training?
I have, yeah.
And can you just explain what that training involves?
I think it was an 8-day course, which I undertook in March 2015. It's essentially dealing with the functions of the command unit, so you wouldn't necessarily do training on specific types of incidents.
Right, I see. And did you get training at all on how to manage fire survival guidance calls from within the command unit?
I'm afraid I really can't remember.
Right. As a watch manager, would you have had training in any event as to incident command and the policies around incident command?
In my previous role as a crew manager, then yes, I'd had training on incident command,
right.
And various scenarios, high-rise incidents being one of those. We did, as a command unit, we did training amongst ourselves, refreshing ourselves on policy and being familiar with our role at the incidents themselves, right. The way we would, the roles that we would take at a high-rise incident.
Right. Okay. Did you have any training specifically on policy 790, which is fire survival guidance?
Yes. The training would be, certainly the refresher training that we would do would be a case of going through the policy ourselves, refreshing ourselves. Okay. As watch managers, we were allowed to train that way.
I see. Just so that we're clear entirely, can I ask you to be shown policy 790, which is in tab 5 of the policies bundle we've got here, and this is entitled Fire Survival Guidance Calls, and it's the policy current as of April 2014. Just there's the first page. I don't know whether that prompts a recollection of of this particular policy from,
Yes.
from your training? And I'm not going to run you through the detail at all. I just wanted to show you paragraph 5, which is a lengthy paragraph dealing with information transfer to the incident. And if you go to paragraph 5, which is on page 2 internally, at the bottom of the page, and then just over the next page, just scan it. I'm not going to ask you details. But if you go to the next page, you can see that there's a long list of things that control has to do by way of gathering information, contacting the initial command pump, and then what the ICP radio operator should do at 5.7, and then 5.9, all FSG call information must be passed to the IC, who will decide what information to take, etc. Matters like that. Is that something that you remember being trained on?
It's something I'm familiar with. I can't remember my training exactly. I will have had training on this.
Right. And just paragraph 9, or 8 and 9 actually. 8 is the advice to fire survival guidance callers, and 9 is communication with control. And 9 particularly, it is vital that control is kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve each FSG call. The fact that control is aware of the actions being carried out on the incident ground will greatly enhance the advice given to FSG callers. Just in general terms, were you trained on how to go about adhering to that policy?
Yes.
You were. And as at your role in the Grenfell Tower, was that training something you had in your mind as to,
yes,
as to how to go about keeping communications going? Yes. Okay. Can I then ask you, go back to the night itself, you say at the top of page 2, you say in the third line, as I was the driver of the fire vehicle call sign CU8, I never had the chance to read any mobile data terminal information. Do you know whether Watch Manager Kentfield looked at it?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. Did you have any discussion with Watch Manager Kentfield en route as to what to expect when you got there?
As we were approaching, we approached from the south. I believe it was along Sirdar Road, and we could already see the tower in bits, just in gaps between the houses, and between about 8 and 10 floors of the tower were already alight.
Right.
So we already had an idea of what we were expecting when we got there.
Right. What did you think when you saw that?
Not only did we have a big fire, but immediately I realised this is something that neither of us would have dealt with before.
Right. Did you hear any radio messages as you were en route?
Yes, we heard. The initial call was to 6-pump fire. Often high-rise incidents will go straight to 6 pumps, even if they're only small fires. So we didn't think it'd be anything out of the ordinary. However, it was made up a number of times as we were en route, which instantly tells us this is something quite significant.
Right. And were you getting what we call multiple calls? Could you hear the multiple calls en route?
I can't remember that message being sent.
Right.
It may have been, I just can't remember.
What about persons reported? You remember that?
I'm sure it did, but I can't actually remember the message.
All right. Was there anything in particular that you, as the driver of Command Unit 8, would be listening out for, given the role that you would be playing?
Yeah, all the messages, really, to get an idea of what to expect when we get there.
Right. Were you, or would that include FSG information specifically?
Yes.
It would.
Yeah.
Did you hear any FSG information or FSG calls?
No. The first FSG information I remember hearing was after we arrived, when Watch Manager Kentfield rigged and went to liaise with the IC. I got onto the back of the command unit to start readying the functions on there, and I could hear control trying to contact the ICP because we hadn't taken over by then. They couldn't get through, and having seen the fire already and assuming that all personnel were most probably involved in other roles, I intercepted the message, and it was FSG information that was coming through.
Right.
So I collected that information.
Okay. I'm going to come to some specifics about that later, because that's something I do want to ask you about. But just en route, you were, of course, were the first command unit to be mobilised to the incident.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yes.
You did. So in terms of the system that you would expect to be in place for managing FSG information before you got there, what were you expecting?
It depends on what the IC wants us to do. The first CU would usually take over as the ICP, but often with FSGs, just because of the level of priority that they are, the incident commander can request that we would become the first CU would become the designated FSG command unit.
Right.
It depends on what the IC wants us to do.
Okay. And just going on in your statement, you say something to that effect. At the top of page 4 of your statement, you say brigade policy, we just look at it together, brigade policy is that one of the first pumps in attendance will be designated ICP by the IC until relieved by a command unit, at which stage the incident commander would normally be based on the command unit for the majority of the time. And then in the third paragraph, you say the standard practice would be when trapped residents call 999, control would relay the information to the ICP, who would then relay this information to the firefighters. Were you expecting that to be the case here?
Yes.
And did you manage to find out anything on your way, because we're still en route at the moment, to the incident, about whether that procedure was being followed at that time?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Okay, on the way to the incident,
Yeah.
did you find out whether the procedure you've described here in the third paragraph was being followed?
So whether control was passing information to the ICP
Yes.
on scene at the time?
Yes.
I wouldn't know.
Okay,
I don't remember hearing FSG information being passed en route.
right. And did you find out which appliance had been designated ICP? Before you
I heard
arrived?
it. I heard the call sign because I heard control trying to contact them, but I can't remember which one it was.
Right. Did you know who was manning it and taking FSG information?
No, I wouldn't know.
Okay. Now, on arrival, I just want to focus on a moment of arrival with you, if I can. We have your arrival time as 01:30 and 48 seconds. Would that sound about right to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at the bottom of page 3 of your statement, you say that you sighted the command unit on Bowmore Road junction with Grenfell Road, where the vehicle I was driving was parked up and remained for the duration. I wonder if we can just identify where that is. I'm going to show you a map that isn't yours, but we may be able to use it.
Sir, can I help myself to a drink?
Of course, yes. I'm sorry, the usher normally would have done that for you, but I think you can manage.
I think I can do.
Yeah.
If I could just ask you to look at MET 000130034, and it'll come up on the screen. This is a map. In fact, this is an exhibit to an earlier firefighter's witness statement, Mr. Abel's witness statement. It's quite a good map, showing the tower and the north, east, south, and west orientations. Roughly where do you think you parked CU8?
If I may, it's not actually on this map,
Yeah.
but it would be, I believe this is Grenfell Road here,
Yes,
and Bowmore Road runs down here.
it's lower
So
down.
we were on the junction just off the map.
Right. Okay. Well, I can show you. I can do better actually. If I can ask you to be shown MET 000130078, which is an exhibit to Justin A. Burns' witness statement. That's a less clear map. You've got the tower.
That's the tower there, yeah?
Yes, that's the tower there, and that is actually looking sort of north to south as you go up.
Oh, right, yeah.
As you go up the page. It may be the wrong way round, in fact. It is the wrong way round.
Belmore Road. So
We're just going to move it round. I think we can just turn it round so that it orientates north to south, and then we could probably see Bowmore Road a bit more clearly. Yes, that's very good. Now,
Right.
Bowmore Road is to the southeast.
Just there.
Right. So where it says A.
Yeah. Where is the cycle hire station?
Okay, and that's where you parked CU7.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's very clear. Now, roughly how long do you think it would take to walk from where you parked just there to the tower?
A minute, 2 minutes?
Right. And after you parked, did you leave the command unit or did you stay with it?
No, I stayed with it. Watch Manager Kentfield went to liaise with the IC. I stayed with the command unit.
Okay. When you parked, did you, maybe you were too far away, but did you see a watch manager working on the bonnet of a car with a forward information board?
Not to my memory, no.
No. And did you speak to the incident commander yourself?
No.
So that was watch manager Kentfield, was
Yes.
it? And do you remember who the incident commander was at the time you arrived?
No. Usually all messages sent. No. Usually all informative messages start with the name of the incident commander. Had an informative message sent, I would have heard it. I can't specifically remember hearing it at that time. Also, another thing that we're in the habit of doing, there's a poster on the command unit, which is another organisational chart like I was describing earlier on the PC, but this is one on the whiteboard. I'd write with a marker the name of the IC there. I can't remember if I specifically did it then, but it's something that we were in the habit of doing at every incident that we went to.
Okay. And did you manage to locate the appliance that was acting as the incident command pump?
It wouldn't have been my job to do that. I wouldn't have been looking for that.
I see. Whose job was that?
Watch Manager Kentfield. Well, he wouldn't have gone directly to the ICP. He would have gone directly to the incident commander.
Yes.
I believe that's what he did anyway.
Okay. Now, on page 4 of your statement, if you look at paragraph 2, you say in the first line and second sentence, I set up the various command support system functions, CSS. And you've described what those are for us. How long did it take you to set up those systems?
You turn the generator on, which takes seconds. You turn the PCs on, and then it takes a while for the PCs to warm up, as it does with most PCs.
Right.
The lights, there's a mast that needs to go up, and like I say, with the organisational chart on the wall, I'd start filling out the details of that. It's not a case of from start to finish. It's pretty much an ongoing process. As the information starts coming in, then you start gathering that.
Right.
But just to get the thing turned on, all the computers on, it can take a good 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes. It also, computers being computers, can depend how long they decide they want to take to turn on.
Yeah. Yes. Did you have any problems with the CSS on CU8?
In general or on that night?
On that night?
Not that I can remember.
Okay.
I'll be honest though, I used very little of the computers that night because almost as soon as I was starting to get everything ready, I could hear control. I intercepted the call from control to the ICP.
Right. Do you remember whether your computer, your CSS, crashed on your CU?
I don't know. I don't remember that happening.
Right. Now, on arrival, before you did the intercept, do you know what system was in place for the management of FSG calls?
What the crews would have been doing on the ground?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember what they were doing?
I don't know what they were doing specifically, but I know what the procedure is.
Right, okay. Well, let's just see how we go in terms of what actually happened. Did you make contact with the ICP to find out what FSG information was coming into it?
No, but then I wouldn't at that time.
Right. Who would?
Watch Manager Kentfield would liaise with the IC, and any information like that would be passed on to him.
Okay. Would he also pass it back to you?
Yes.
Okay.
To be honest, actually, not necessarily. In the greater scheme of things, yes, you would. But obviously, it's a very dynamic incident. Things are taking course as a matter of priority. So the calls coming in with a priority, the calls that the incident ground would have already had would have been passed on. That's information that they got, and later with collecting the information when we're trying to get around a picture, yes, we'd want that then. But at the time, the calls coming in and the information going to the bridgehead is a priority. If they've already got that information, then there's no point at that time, it's not a priority at that time, to pass that information back to me.
Right. Was it important, though, for you when setting up and, as it were, coming into an already dynamic situation to find out what the existing system was for receiving information on the fireground from control about FSG calls, and then how it was being communicated to the bridgehead?
Like I say, almost as soon as I was starting to get the functions ready on the back of the CU, I could hear control trying to contact the ICP. I didn't have time to find out those other bits beforehand.
Right. Now, in his contemporaneous notes, Watch Manager Kentfield says that he helped set up the fire survival guidance system or communication system with a watch manager called Sadler on the bonnet of a car between CU8 and the tower. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that happening? And you said you couldn't see it happening, but do you remember the fact that he was doing that?
All I can say is not long after Watch Manager Kentfield left the CU, I was receiving the FSG information and then passing it on to him on the incident ground. How he was going about doing that, I never asked him.
Right.
I never asked him because it wasn't a priority for me to know that information.
Okay. I see. So as soon as you started getting FSG information from control, you passed it to Watch Manager Kentfield?
Yeah. On the handheld radios on Channel 10, Channel 10 generally is used between command support officers, so it wouldn't be interfering with the fireground messages which are on Channel 1.
Right. Okay. I didn't realise. So CU officers have their own designated channel?
Yeah.
Did you ever have any communication difficulties in using Channel 10?
Not that I remember.
Right. And so you communicated with ease, did you, with Watch Manager Kentfield throughout the night?
It wasn't. It was just in the beginning stages of the incident that I was passing that information on to him. Things changed shortly afterwards. Probably within the first half hour, the process changed. Can
you just tell us in brief terms how that process changed? Because we'll come back to it and explore it in some detail, I suspect.
I was taking information from control. I was writing it down. I was passing it on to Watch Manager Kentfield. And then almost as soon as I do that, control would get back to me with more information, and I'd follow the same process until at a given point, and I'm afraid at a very rough guess, 10-15 minutes into the incident, the command unit mobile phone, which I was carrying and I would have done as the driver, that rang, and it was Station Manager Olif at control, who then started to pass the information via the mobile rather than the main scheme radio. So I carried on the same process with passing that information to Watch Manager Kentfield until Charlie Inform 7, Wembley's command unit, arrived with Watch Managers Peckham and Harrison. They, and then Station Manager Egan as well, and shortly after Group Manager Goodall, from then on, we all worked as an FSG team the rest of the night. I was collecting the information, they would then pass it on. So at a point, and I'm afraid I can't remember what it was, I stopped passing the information on to Watch Manager Kenfield. I would give it to them, and they would deal with it. We then moved on to Channeling Form 7, which became the designated FSG CU.
Right. Charlie, you say...
Channeling Form 7, Wembley's Command Unit.
I follow. Right. Now, in terms of how you initially received messages from Brigade Control to CU7 right at the start, you say it was by radio. Was that the main scheme radio,
Yeah.
was it? Right. That's Channel 1.
Channel 4.
Channel 4. So, I see, because we see references to RT4 in the short incident log we're going to come to. That would be Channel 4, would it?
Yeah.
Right. Now, on page 4, in paragraph 2, we've just been looking at the CSS, you say in the second line, within moments of arriving, Control were trying to contact the incident command pump to pass on fire survival guidance information. And then you say, due to the heavy radio traffic, they were struggling to get through. I intercepted the calls from Control, but I never took over as ICP at any time. How did you know that Control was struggling to get through?
Nobody was answering the radio on the ICP. They were calling them, but nobody was answering it.
Who was telling you that?
I was listening to it. It's an open radio channel, so I can hear all the radio messages sent on Channel 4. I would have been able to hear. Everybody would be able to hear on that channel.
Yes, I see. And could you also see the fact that they were sending messages to the incident command pump on the CSS computer screen?
No. No, on the CSS, it only shows the messages between yourself, that vehicle. So in our case, Channeling Form 8 and Control, it wouldn't show every message being sent.
I understand. Okay. So in terms of what you were hearing, you could hear Control radioing the ICP, but not getting anything in response. Yeah. And who at Control do you know was doing that? Was it people who were actually on the other end of a call, a 999 call, or was it a supervisor?
Just I don't know. It was a control operator.
Right. And that's on Channel 4?
Yes.
Right. And how did you intercept the calls, as you say you did?
As they called a number of times, 2, 3, maybe 4 times. They weren't getting an answer. And because we were there, we were going to be taken over as the ICP. And I think, to be honest, I probably had an idea what the information was going to be. I answered the radio and I can't remember what I said, but words to the effect of, we're in attendance, is there any information we can take?
Right. And do you remember who you spoke to?
The control operator. I wouldn't know who that was.
Right. Okay. Now, can I just show you something? In the ORR, the Operational Response Report. Now, this is, just so you know what it is, it's a document compiled by the London Fire Brigade in May this year, which is a detailed timeline of the first hour at Grenfell Tower. And I just want to show you page 59. And in fact, we've got a transcript as well, which I'll also show you, but this is a summary of it. So let's just take it slowly. At 1:35:24, at the bottom of the page, there is a record that Control Manager Norman rings team leader, Watch Manager Daniel Meyrick on CU8, who had booked in attendance at the incident at 01:30:48. She said she needs crews to go and check some flats. The CU say they're in the process of setting up. Watch Manager Meyrick also asks if the message has already been sent by radio. Norman says she doesn't know. Then she says that it's the 18th floor, referring to the question about radio message. She says, oh my God, there are so many. She says it's going to be every floor. And then over the page we see some information passed to CU8.
Sorry, is that what the operator said to me?
Well, I'm going to show you the transcript because, yes, we have a transcript of that call. But just first of all, in general terms, do you remember this conversation?
I don't remember those words, but I remember the conversation.
Okay. Do you remember whether this was a call to you on the radio, the main scheme radio, or was this on the mobile already?
I'm afraid I'm pretty sure the only person I spoke to on the mobile phone was Station Manager Olive.
Right.
Like I say, I can remember intercepting the radio call, taking FSG information. I can then remember spending most of the rest of the night on the mobile phone, but I can remember very little of exact words that were exchanged.
Right. I'm going to show you the transcript of that call, which is in tab 72 of the documents bundle. And it's INQ 50194. And just so you know what this is and can help us with it, it's a transcript which has been created from an admin line call, and it's timed at 01:35:24. And you can see it says control FSG information flat 111 and flat 175 CU8. And at page 2 at the start it says unknown, something is occupied, going on, and then CU8 Charlie Uniform 8. And then control says, hi, it's control here. Listen, I know you just got there, but I need some flats to be checked at this place.
Sorry to interrupt. This is a radio conversation.
Yes, this
Right.
is what we understand to be. Well, this is one of my questions actually. We've got this recorded in the operational response report as a radio message, an admin call. That's what we've been told it is. It's an admin call, and it's a transcript of an admin call. And one of my first question was going to be, how would this have been transmitted to you? Would it be a radio call?
The phrase admin call is not something I'm familiar with, I'm afraid.
Right, okay.
If you go through it, it might bring something back.
Well, let's do that, and let's see if it does bring something back. She says, a quarter of the way down the page, hi, it's control here. Listen, I know you just got there, but I need some flats to be checked at this place. And you say, yeah, I know. Somebody, CU8 says, yeah, I know. I could hear you trying to get through to 271. We're in attendance. We're in the process of taking over. And then she says, right, can I just give you these flat numbers, please, for you to go and check, because we are inundated with calls over here. And CU8 says, sorry, say that again. Control, I need you to get the crews to go and check people in flats that are trapped in flat. Yeah, go ahead, what flat numbers? Just pausing there, do you remember this initial or early conversation with control?
Yeah, like I say, I remember having the conversations. The first conversation I remember having was on the radio with control.
Right.
This doesn't sound like radio conversation, this sounds like a phone conversation.
I see.
It may not be, I don't know. Radio conversations tend to be a bit more formal than that, but it may not be.
Right.
I can remember being on the radio, taking information. This is how I remember it. Whether my mind's playing tricks with me, they may have called me on the phone first, I don't know, but this sounds more like a phone conversation.
And you say that because there's none of the formal radio speak?
Yeah, unless words over Charlie Uniform 8, this is control, whatever, unless that's been left out of this message, it doesn't sound like a radio conversation.
Okay, can I just ask you, if you go to the next page, about halfway down, you see CU8 is recorded as saying 1 in 111 question mark, and then somebody's put in over speaking. Is it possible to overspeak on a radio communication?
No.
Right.
No, only one person can speak at a time.
Thank you.
Okay. So, on the basis of that, would you conclude that this was a telephone conversation and not a radio discussion?
All I can say is it sounds more like a telephone conversation.
Right. Okay. You say, let's just push that a little bit further. That yeah, that's right. On page 2, CU8, you say, this is a third of the way down, yeah, I know, I could hear you trying to get through to 271. We're in attendance, we're in the process of taking over. That reference to control trying to get through to 271, is that a reference, do you remember, to what you heard on the radio to start with?
I'm sure it will be, yeah.
Okay. And then at the bottom of page 3, still on the subject of these communications, the penultimate entry, CU8, okay, can you just confirm? I think I've heard your colleague just transmit that message. Do you know if that is the case? That's a reference to people trapped by the smoke in 111. When you say, I think I heard your colleague just transmit that message, how would you have heard that?
Can we read through a little bit before it, just to put it in a bit more context, please?
Yes. Well, I'll read it from the bottom of page 2, where you ask for flat numbers. Control says, right, so I've got flat number 111, which is on the 14th floor, and number 175, which is on the 20th floor, 20th floor. Yeah, they've both got a lot of smoke coming in, so, but they're all stuck in, they can't, there's 5 people in 175, 5 people in 175, 1 in 111, and then there's overspeaking. Control then says, yeah, but they're all trapped by the smoke, okay, they've all got smoke coming into their premises. Okay, can you just confirm, I think I've heard your colleague just transmit that message, do you know if that's the case? I'm just pausing there. To repeat my question, now I've shown you the longer context. How do you think you heard Control's colleague transmit the message?
And this is definitely the first conversation that took place between myself and Control, is it?
I don't know that, and it may well not be. And the reason I say that is, let me just take you back a tab to a different document, since you're asking me fairly whether it is the first conversation. If you go to a document entitled LFB quadruple 03078, which is in tab 71 of the documents bundle.
Just while that's being looked up, an earlier question of yours has been answered, because I do at one point say I heard you trying to talk to 271, so I would have known at that point who the ICP was.
Right. And this document is a transcript of something timed at 01:43:07. Now, whether that looks like a later conversation, or 01:40:50, similar, and it's an RT. If you look at the legend at the very top, and it says caller FN. This is Charlie Uniform 8. We're in the process of setting up here. Is there any information you want to pass to us? Operator, yeah. Now,
that sounds like my intercepted message.
Right.
So by starting by saying FN is how you'd address Channel 4 control staff.
Right.
Essentially, there's 2 channels that are generally used. Channel 4, FN in the north of the river. South of the river, it's FS, Channel 2. So I'd be addressing them as FN. This is Charlie Uniform 8. that sounds like a radio message. And it sounds like that was my message intercepting their attempts to call Golf 271.
I see, okay. It may well be that the timing isn't quite right at the top of that, but you think that's the interceptory message, and that would be by radio, do you think?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Right, on Channel 4?
Yes.
Right. And FN, and N is north, I suspect. F is what? What does FN stand for?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you for definite.
All right. Now, just going back to the next transcript, which we were looking at a minute ago, she then goes on to say at the bottom of page 3, I don't know, to be honest with you, we've got loads of calls going on, loads of calls waiting on all sorts. And then there's a bit more conversation. And then CU8 says on page 4, it's just radio traffic's going to be a bit of a nightmare because we've already got about 2 people, and then, oh, there's over speaking. Do you remember what that might be about?
I don't. I mean, you asked earlier about people talking over each other on the radio. What can happen is people pressing the press to talk switch pretty much at the same time, and somebody finishes a statement and then somebody else is talking over when they realise that they can't actually get through. So maybe I'm referring to that.
Okay. And then she goes on to say there's another one, that one's on the 18th floor, CU8, so there's one on the 18th floor as well, question. And then control says, we've got one on the 18th floor, hold on, 18th floor, oh my God, there's so many. Top floor, adults and 8 children, smoke coming in, I don't know what number that is. And CU8, oh sorry, is that the 18th floor, but you don't know the number? No, it's just there's a flat on the top floor. Query, top floor, and 2 adults and 8 children. There's smoke going into the flat, so there's no flat number. They left the call. And then over the and you say, okay, all right, mate, and there's over speaking. And then at the top of page 5, control says, and there's one on the 18th floor, but we don't. It's going to be every floor, but we haven't got a number for that either. CU8 says, one on the 18th floor, okay, all right, okay, thank you, cheers. And the conversation ends. Now, I've read to the end, Mr. Meyrick, because I just want to ask you a couple of general questions about it. Do you remember this particular call?
No, I don't. Like I say, I remember having the conversations. I cannot remember any of the details of the conversations. I can remember from immediately taking the calls, being aware of just the numbers, and if that was a conversation that took place, then I'd been told before I got any information that there was a lot of them. Normally, we control FSG, we record FSG information on the information control pad. This is a pad which the pages are in quadruplicate. You fill out all the details. 1 copy is retained on the command unit, 3 of the copies can be distributed wherever they're needed on the incident ground. I realised straight away with the amount of calls that this wasn't going to be practical. There was just going to be paper everywhere. So I just got a blank piece of paper and I was recording the flat number, the floor the flat was on. I think I was recording adults and children involved, and then conditions within the flat to make an order of the priority. If there's heavy smoke logging, then that would be more of a priority than if there's light smoke logging.
Right.
And that's how I remember it. The details of conversations, no, I can't remember.
No, okay. And can you remember, first of all, what was your general impression of the scale and number of the FSG calls?
It was huge, and I could tell it was going to get a lot bigger because I could see the fire. I could see what was going on. And bearing in mind the time of day, most people were going to be in bed. I'd realised this was going to be, something else.
Okay. Now, in terms of recording the information that we've just seen recorded in this call, or information like it, you say you wrote it down. Did you write it down on an FSG information pad?
No, as I said, I realised that just wasn't going to be practical.
Right, I see. Okay.
So it was just a blank piece of paper. I was recording on a blank piece of paper. When watch managers Harrison and Peckham arrived from Charlie Uniform 7, Wembley's command unit, they were then starting to record that information on the whiteboard and helping to make more of a sense of it and help me to pass it on.
Okay. Having written down the information, such as the information we've just seen passed to you by Alex Norman, what did you then do with the pieces of paper?
When we moved over to Charlie Uniform 7, everything went with us. Right. Like I said, watch managers Harrison and Peckham were recording it on the whiteboard. We didn't take the... We do have... Most of the whiteboards are fixed to the wall, but sometimes we do have loose whiteboards. I don't think they took one across. I think we took photos of what we'd already written down, as well as any loose pieces of paper. All the paperwork that we could transfer across did go across to Charlie Uniform 7.
Before you got to that stage, then, in terms of the information that you'd recorded on these blank pieces of paper, what was your next step with that information? What did you do with it next?
As I said, in the very first stages, I was relaying that to Watch Manager Kentfield.
Right. And did you relay that all in one chunk, or did you do it FSG by FSG?
The way I remember it, I was getting a handful of calls. I'd pass that information on. Control would then almost be straight back to me with a handful more calls. I would pass that on. So it wasn't one at a time. It wasn't dozens at a time. It was in smaller chunks. But the numbers I couldn't give you, I'm afraid.
Right. Can I then ask you to turn on to page 70 of the ORR, the Operational Response Report? Now, at the bottom of that page, at 01:40 and 50 seconds, we have a record of a priority radio message being sent by radio by control to G271, which is North Kensington's pump ladder, which doesn't respond. And at page 73, if you just look on, at 01:43:07, 3 minutes or so later, that shows that a radio message was sent by you in CU8 back to control, where you're recorded as saying that you're offering to take the FSG calls information on behalf of G271, who are not responding to the priority call from control. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the unanswered call from control to Golf 271 when I intercepted the message.
Right. So going back, that may tie it up then for us. If you go back to tab 71 of the documents bundle and that very short radio transcript we saw earlier, then perhaps the time is correct. This is LFB *03078. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Right, I see. So we can tie those together. So then the time, 01:43:07, is the link with the ORR, and that's correct. But before that, it seems that you were having conversations already with control, because we've seen the transcript at the next tab 72, at 01:35:24, taking quite a lot of detail about fire survival guidance calls. So the question is, in terms of timing, it looks from this as if you were agreeing to take FSG calls intended for G271 a little bit of time after you started actually getting details of fire survival calls direct from control. Would that be right?
All I can say is, as I remember it, which was the first time I can remember taking FSG information from control, the first communication that I can remember having appears to be this first one. This is channel from 8, we're setting up, is there any information we can take? Over the main scheme radio. That's the first conversation I can remember having.
Right.
I was then passed information via the main scheme. Sometime later that changed to the mobile. That first conversation that you've shown me,
Yes.
I'm not saying I didn't have that conversation, but it's not ringing any bells with me. I don't remember having that conversation, certainly not before that RT message, the main scheme radio message saying, can we pass on information?
Is it possible, and if you don't know, don't speculate, and I'm inviting you to, but is it possible that Watch Manager Kentfield didn't leave CU8 immediately, but stayed with you while you set up?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to get from the, not that it's a great journey, but you've got to get from the cab onto the back. It may be that if that's a mobile conversation, he took the call, he took that information, and then whilst I was getting onto the back of the machine, if that happened, I have no memory of it.
Okay. And you don't remember him telling you that he'd taken a set of FSG call information from control?
I don't remember him saying that, but that doesn't mean to say it didn't happen.
Right.
I'm afraid.
Okay. And just in terms of the mobile telephone that was on CU8 as opposed to the radio, which would use RT4, where would that physically be located? Would it be in the cab or would it be in the business
mobile,
end of CU8?
it would be on my hip. I'd have had it on my belt.
Right.
It can, if I'm driving, I can't answer it, so it could be that I pass it to him. This does occasionally happen.
Right.
So I may have handed it to him. Parking was tricky. I mean, like it showed on the map, there's a cycle park there and cars everywhere, so it was a bit of manoeuvring to get it in the space. I was concentrating on that. There is a chance the phone rang, I passed it to him and he took the information. I'm afraid I just have no memory of that happening if that was the case.
Yeah. I mean, your status 3 arrived at just literally just after 1:30. This call is at 1:35:24.
Right, some minutes later, yeah. I don't know.
We're just exploring that as a possibility.
Yeah.
Either way, you definitely don't remember having this call on an admin line, which you can't help us with.
No, I don't remember that.
At 1:35:24. Okay. But you do remember this radio transmission
Yes.
as a takeover. Do you remember that at the time you did you took over, or rather you told control through this very short radio message that you're in the process of setting up? Do you remember whether information was being sent to G271 but not getting through?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember whether you at CU8 were using both the radio, RT4 channel, and the brigade mobile at this point?
At which point, sorry?
At this point, 1:43. At the point, going back to the top of page 43 of the ORR, 73 of the ORR, at 1:43:07, when you contact brigade control and offer to take the FSG calls, which is what we've just looked at. At that point, did you know, were you using both the radio and the brigade mobile?
When I offered to intercept the information that was on the main scheme radio, I would have had the the command unit mobile phone then, but I wouldn't have been using it then.
Okay, right. Can I take you back then to the bottom of page 60 of the operational response report document? I'm sorry to take you back in time, but in the light of where we've got to, it may make some sense to do this at this stage. At the bottom of page 60, you'll see a time mark of 01:35:54. And that says Golf 261 Acton's pump ladder interrupt the CRO, attempting to pass the radio message to Golf 271 North Kensington's pump ladder. saying that they will take the priority message on behalf of Golf 271, North Kensington's pump ladder, who have not responded. The CRO passes FSG call information to Golf 261, Acton's pump ladder, saying they have a caller on the 18th floor with thick smoke in their flat, individuals on the 22nd floor with smoke in their flat, and a further call to fire on the 20th floor. In flat 82, people are also trapped. Golf 261's Acton pump ladder are still on their way to the incident, and they state they will pass on the information to Golf 271, North Kensington's pump ladder, when they arrive. First of all, do you remember hearing over the main scheme radio that discussion?
No, I don't. To be honest, as far as I can remember, the first FSG information I heard being recorded was by me. Was the information I got on the radio message from control when I intercepted their attempt to contact Golf 271.
Right. And that may answer my next question, but I'll still ask it to see how far we get, if you don't mind. In the next paragraph, at the top of page 61 of the ORR, it says, during the phone conversation that Norman had at 03524 with CU8, and that's the one with the over-speaking in it that looks like it was done on the mobile, the CREO can be heard sending the information to Golf 261's Acton's pump ladder. And obviously you don't recall that conversation, but as a prompt, do you remember having a conversation with the control room during which the control room officer can be heard sending information to G261 Acton?
No, I don't remember that.
Okay. Do you remember in general terms having a picture in your head that control was sending FSG messages to CU8, G271 and G261 at the same time?
Control sending FSG information to those three different places?
Yes.
No, like I say, as far as I can remember, I thought all the FSG information was coming to me.
Right. Now, if I can ask you then to go forward in time a little bit and forward in the ORR a little bit to page 73 of the ORR. And this is just after the very short radio conversation about interception that we talked about at 014307. And this time we're looking at 014313. I'm sorry, 014307, top of the page. I'm so sorry. That's the message we looked at with a transcript at page 2, tab 71, where you say we're in the process of setting up. And then immediately below it, to give you the context, 14313, CRO Derby contacts CU8 and passes the following information about fire survival calls they have recently been received. And then a source is given as radio message. And then there is a summary of information underneath it with some 7 floors and numbers of people in some cases and some remarks. And the floor numbers are 10, 23, 12, 14, 17, 12 and 18. Do you... First of all, do you remember receiving information like that from Sharon Derby in the control room?
As I remember it, this was the first FSG information I received.
Right. Do you know how she contacted you?
Main scheme radio.
And did you record that information?
Yes. On a blank piece of paper.
Right. And that's what you remember?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did you do with that information?
I contacted Watch Manager Kentfield via the handheld radio on Channel 10, and I passed on the information as I had it.
Right. Did you form a view at the time about whether the information that Sharon Derby was giving you was sufficient without the flat numbers and, in many cases, the numbers of persons?
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, let me try it a different way. You'll see the summary of the information, In some cases, you're not given a flat number, and in some cases, in fact, all cases except 2, you're not given numbers of people. Did you form a view about whether that was sufficient fire survival guidance information?
I think that's the wrong section we're looking at, isn't it? You want the top box, don't you?
Yes, that's right, the top box. We're looking at 143.13.
The control information pad that I referred to earlier has a number of different boxes to record as much information as you can possible to paint as clear a picture as possible. Understanding the weight of calls that were coming through, I realised it wasn't possible to get all that information. I just wanted the most pertinent pieces of information. I don't know if you've got a transcript of the exact conversation that took place between me and Control, but I think they were relaying, and bits that weren't relayed, I was asking for specifically the flat numbers, and at the top one where, well, there's a few where it's not given. My assumption is that they probably didn't have the flat numbers at the time, but that's what I was asking for, was the flat numbers, the floor numbers, the amount of people, and by remarks I'm meaning the conditions within the flat. Normally, like I say, we'd be exchanging more information. Control will pass on more information. I'd be asking for more information. But I could tell the amount of calls that were coming through. That was the priority. Those details were the priority.
Right. Okay. And did you tell her anything? Did you, or you just received the information, wrote it down and passed it on?
Like I say, on a couple of points, I do remember where certain information wasn't given, whether it was conditions or whatever, I would ask that. But about specifics, I don't know. And that's why I say when I look at these flat numbers where it's not given, my assumption is at the time Control weren't given those flat numbers, but that is just an assumption.
Right. And was any of this information recorded on the CSS, do you think?
No, not at that time.
Right.
CSS probably hadn't even started up by then. You, like a normal computer program, you start the computer up, you wait until it's going, and then you open that specific program. And I'm sure it was before that had a chance to happen that this was coming through. And standard practice is not for us to do that as we're recording the information anyway. The standard practice is to record it on the control information pad.
Right.
And then relay it on. As I said, the only thing I didn't do with regards to standard practice was use a control information pad. It was just a blank piece of paper.
Yes, okay. And just so we're absolutely clear about what you mean when you refer to the control information pad, can you please be shown, it's the FSG policy 790, tab 5 of the policies bundle, appendix 2, which is on page 8 internally of that policy. Is that what you mean when you refer to a control information?
Yes.
Right, okay, just to be clear.
And as I said, that is that form is in quadruplicate, as it says at the bottom, the white copy, yellow copy, blue, green. Yes. And I realised that there was going to be paper all over the place. We did subsequently, I say we, I didn't, but other people on the FSGCU, as far as I'm aware, complete all of these forms where necessary. Yeah. But at the time, I couldn't practically do that.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, it's almost 11:15,
yes,
and we've been going for an hour and a quarter. I'm not nearly finished this particular line. There's more. There are more questions along this theme for a while. So,
but even so, that would be a convenient
moment as any, I think, for a break. That's
yes. Well, Mr. Meyrick, you might like a break as well. We probably all would. So we'll stop now for about a quarter of an hour. Resume at 11:30.
Okay.
And excuse me, I must ask you not to talk about your evidence or anything to do with it during the break. All right?
Okay.
Fine. You'd like to go with the usher? She'll look after you. Thank you. 11:30 then, please. Thank you. can have a minute to settle down because we're running a minute early, surprisingly.
Sneaking a witness.
What?
Sneaking a witness.
Yeah. Right. Is Mr. Meyrick there? I hope he is. Yeah. Yes, come on, I'll shut my eyes.
The curtain has gone up.
Right, Mr. Meyrick, you happy to carry on?
Good, sir.
Good, well done, thank you.
Right.
Yes, Mr.
Yes. Mr. Meyrick, can I just ask you one or two questions to go back over a little bit of material we've covered before this morning? You say that Watch Manager Kentfield went to find the incident commander. Were you aware that he found him or not?
I believe he did, yeah.
Did he tell you that?
I'm pretty sure he did.
Right. How would he have told you that?
He wouldn't necessarily, the procedure isn't necessarily that he would meet the IC, then radio back to me to say, yep, I've found him. He would go there, speak to the IC, we're here, what do you want from us?
Right.
And then he'd relay back any information to me.
Okay.
I think it may well have been, Watch Manager Kentfield would have been gone from the CU moments before that call was, before I intercepted that call and was then taking FSG information. So
Okay.
I remember Watch Manager Kentfield came back to the command unit at some point. I'm afraid I can't remember exactly why that was.
Okay. Now, you told us a little bit, or gave us an impression of this computer system gearing up, and you said it took a few minutes to gear up. Do you know whether that's normal? Is it normal on arrival at an incident for a command unit's computer systems to take a while to warm up and get ready for use?
It's just like any computer, any PC takes a few minutes to warm up.
Right. Okay. And this system, is this system capable of doing video conferencing, or?
Yes.
It is. Okay. And what about taking video footage? Is that a facility that's available on the CU?
Only within the CU, yes.
Within the CU?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Right.
not something that you can take out onto the incident ground.
No. Okay. Going back to where we were in terms of fire survival guidance, we were looking at page 73 of the ORR. And perhaps just have it up again. 014313 is the FSG information that Sharon Darby sends to CU8 by radio message, and there are the details, and you've told us about that before. And you said that you passed that on to Watch Manager Kentfield on the incident ground by radio.
Yes.
That's right, is it?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, do you know what he did with it?
No.
Okay. Did he come back to you and say, received and understood, so that you were sure he'd got it?
Yes.
Do you know how he recorded it? There's quite a lot of detail there.
No, I don't.
Right.
It's a standard procedure when you pass information, especially something as critical as that, as was done in the conversation between myself and control, is you would confirm it back. So I'd read some of the details out, he'd then confirm it back to me.
Right.
I can't remember that exactly taking place, but that's our procedure.
Did you get an impression from what he was saying back to you that he was recording it, or saying it to somebody else who was recording it?
I couldn't tell.
Right. How did you think? What did you think he was doing by way of recording this important information you were giving him?
It would have been written down.
It would have been written down.
Well, I just can't think of any other way he would have recorded it other than writing it down. Whether he was relaying it to somebody else to write down, I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. Now, if we look at the short incident log, which you'll find in tab 23 of the documents bundle, I'd like you to go to page 19 of that document. And at that page you'll find, next to timestamp 014319, a message. And this is close to, or as close as I can get to, the message recorded in the ORR at 014313 that we've just been looking at, that bunch of messages that you recorded. And now here we have 014319, so just a second or two later, in the middle of the page, PD sends a service request created, RT4, to G271, people stuck in flats on 10th floor. Now, it looks like it was sent to G271, but it also looks as if we can just flip back to page 73 of the ORR, and I'm sorry to jump between documents, if the documents director just highlights the first entry in the table under 143.13, you can see flat number not given, floor number 10, remarks people stuck. So it looks as if it's the same message, but it looks as if this one's going to G271 and not to command unit 8. Can you help me with that? Was that message that goes to 271 the same message that came to CU8?
I couldn't say that. Can I ask you to go back to the previous one?
Yes.
That was highlighted?
Yes, to the previous, to page 73.
And if you can just remove the highlighted section. Thank you.
So is that the document to look at?
Yeah, that's good. This is from our boss mobilising system, and it will relay all messages, all actions taken by controls, and it lists everything. And I'm afraid, on a standard small incident, you can have reams of paperwork that comes through, and a lot of it doesn't make a great deal of sense to myself or most other people in my position. Just you can pick the odd bits out when informative messages, priority messages, things like that come through. But I'm afraid I don't know exactly what that is stating by that.
Right. Okay, let's see if I can get at this a slightly different way. You can see the message at 014319 in this log, which is the short incident log created by the LFB. If you look further down the same page, just looking at the entries, you can see there are numerous service requests from 143.58 onwards on RT4 to G271. So there's one at 143.58, there's one at 144.56, 145.01, etc., all the way down the page, in fact. I think every single entry on the rest of that page, and indeed over to the next page, are messages RT4 to G271 providing fire survival guidance call information in relation to different flats and different floors. My question is, did you know at the time, around this time, so after you'd taken over receipt of the FSG calls into CU8, that FSG calls were continuing to be sent to G271 by control?
As I said earlier, as far as I was aware, from when I started taking FSG calls, I thought all the FSG calls were coming to me. You can only have two people speaking on any one, you can only have one person speaking on any one channel at a given time. So if control passing information to me on channel 4, and then I'm answering to them, nobody else could be passing information on channel 4. Now, when I'm relaying information to Watch Manager Kentfield on the handheld radio, another conversation could have been taking place. I think that is highly unlikely. I certainly can't remember. Because I would have heard it, I would have been sat by the radio, other conversations taking place, certainly not other conversations passing FSG information. So as far as I'm aware, from when I took over on Channel 4, I was the only person who was collecting FSG information.
Right. Just exploring then that a little bit further, if you continue down on page 20 of the short incident log, all the way down to halfway down page 21, indeed about 2/3 of the way down that page, you can see that the first RT4 to CU8 entry is at 2:05:55. Sorry, I'm so sorry. 2:02:36 is RT4 to CU8. There's a message immediately before that, which looks like a longer message, being passed to CU8 at approximately 1:50. That looks like a recorded earlier message, which has been typed in. But the first service request created we have, I think, is at 02:02:36. Do you see that?
Yep.
RT4 to CU8, 2 persons trapped in flat 74 on the 10th floor level. Until that time, or apart from the one at 02:01:43, which relates to an earlier message anyway, it looks as if all of the service requests are going via RT4 to G271 and don't go to CU8 until 02:02:36. Can you explain that?
No, I'm afraid I can't. All I can say is from when I was taking the calls, at a time that I couldn't give, if it's been recorded correctly or not, I don't know.
Is it? I mean, to the best of your recollection, were FSG messages continuing to go to G271 via RT4 for a good half an hour after you had taken over, or 25 minutes after you'd taken over?
No. As far as I'm aware, I recorded from when I intercepted that message.
Right.
All FSG calls were coming through me. To the best of my knowledge, I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case, because I was on the radio. I was using the radio most of the time. Right. So for other messages to be passed on Channel 4 would be very unlikely.
Can I just ask, could you hear the messages going to 271?
Yeah, we would do, yeah. Because it was a message, a priority message, going to Golf 271 that wasn't answered, that I then
I'm just wondering whether you, as it were, treated them as being sent to you, even though they'd been sending them to 271. Because we don't see messages being sent to CU8 until later.
So are you saying that it may have been recorded as being going to Golf 271, whereas it's actually going to Charlie Uniform 8?
Well, it might have been sent to 271, and you might have heard it going to 271. Is that possible?
I spoke to Control to confirm that I was Charlie Uniform 8, and then when they passed the message, when they were passing the FSG information, I was recording that as Charlie Uniform 8. So it wasn't as if they were passing the information to Golf 271 and I was just overhearing it and recording it as they were passing it to Golf 271.
Right. Yes. All right. Thank you.
So just so that I'm clear, and I'm afraid I can't pick that up on the screen because my screen's frozen, but when you were sitting in CU8, did you hear over RT4 calls destined for G271?
The only call that I heard was the initial priority call that Golf 271 didn't answer.
Okay.
I then stated Golf 27, Charlie Uniform 8 could take the information. From then on, I didn't hear any further calls to Golf 271.
Okay. Now, going back to page 21 of tab 23, which is the short incident log, looking at the time mark of 02:01:43, which I showed you a minute ago in passing, you've got, it says key, and then a set of FSG messages, which you can see there. All calls, it says at the end, passed to CU8 at approx 01:50. First of all, do you know why that would appear in the short incident log about 11 minutes later?
No.
Okay. If you turn, and again, it may be difficult to keep these two open at the same time, but just if you note the details. It's flat 161, 23rd floor, floor 10 persons, 10 persons, flat 204 on 23rd floor, 1 person, flat 14, 1 person, flat 9, 2 adults, 3 children, 1 in wheelchair, flat 175, 20th floor, 5 persons inside, all calls passed. Just looking at those details, now if I can ask you to turn to the ORR, the Operational Response Report, at page 78. I'm afraid I'm not sure it's possible to have these two documents up at the same time. Mr. Documents Director, if we can do that, that would be tremendously helpful. So, page 21 of the short incident log at the same time as page 78 of the ORR. If we can split the screens. Yes. And if I can just ask you to look at the bottom of page 78 of the ORR, time marked 014744. It says Norman rings CU8 and passes over a request for the flats below to be checked. And the source is Vision. And then you can see flat number 161, floor 23, number of people 10. And there's a remark about 161 not being on the 23rd floor. And then over the page, you can see more details. Flats 204, 14, 9 and 75. And that looks as if it corresponds with the details which are recorded in the short incident log, which are passed over to CU8 at approximately 150. So having put those two together, do you remember how that message would have been sent to CU8?
I'm afraid no.
Might it have been by Brigade Mobile or by RT?
If it was from an operator, then it most probably would have been via radio, because I'm pretty sure that the only person I spoke to on the mobile phone was Station Manager Olif.
Right. I see. And have you any idea why the short incident log would not record that message or those messages as having been sent by RT4?
No.
Okay. And in relation to this particular information, do you know what you in CU8 did with it?
As I say, I was recording it on a blank piece of paper and then passing it on to Watch Manager Kenfield. Right.
Again.
Until, with the specifics of those calls, I don't know if by then I'd been... I don't know if then I'd been joined by Watch Managers Harrison and Peckham, who then were assisting with passing on the information.
Okay, we're going to come to their arrival shortly, but I think to answer your question, they arrive at about 2 o'clock. You say that in your statement.
Okay, so if that was before 2 o'clock, then it would have been me passing the information via handheld radio to Watch Manager Kenfield. And
just so you're clear in your mind, specifically, we do have arrival times for Goodall as 0204 and Egan as 0158. Mm-hmm. So it looks as if that would have been before that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you go to your statement at page 4, can I just ask you to look at the second paragraph on that page? We've looked at it before, but I just want to come back to it. You say at the very end of that paragraph in the last sentence, I intercepted the calls from control, but I never took over as ICP at any time. Can I ask you, why was that? Why didn't you take over as ICP?
As I say, the standard procedure is that the team leader would liaise with the incident commander, ask if they wanted us to take us over. In this situation, the answer would have been yes. He'd relay that back to me, and then I'd pass that information on to control. That never happened, probably because as short as that dialogue would have been, and the communication needed to transfer that information, it was low down on the order of priorities. I can't speak for what happened to Watch Manager Kenfield when he met with the incident commander, but like I say, almost as soon as he left the command unit, I was receiving FSG calls.
Right, okay. And Did the fact that you never actually took over as incident command pump mean that control was still communicating with G271, which was the initial command pump?
Like I said, all radio communications to them would most likely be on Channel 4 because we were north of the river, and I was, as far as I'm aware, I was taking all of those calls.
Right.
And it was all FSG.
Okay. I'm just... I see. Okay. Now, in the last paragraph of page 4 of your statement, at the foot of the page, you say that after CU7 arrived, CU8 remained as the ICP. Can you just square that with your statement earlier on the same page in paragraph 2, which we've just looked at, where you said, I never took over as ICP at any time?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, officially, it was never made the ICP. That, from me, that message wasn't sent. Whether it was sent later in the incident, I don't know. My assumption is that control assumed that we'd taken over as the ICP. I don't know, but whether it was or not officially, it was certainly dealt with as the ICP on the incident ground and at control.
What CU8 was?
CU8 was. CU7 was the FSG command unit. Sorry, I don't know if this has been explained, but when there's FSG calls, there will automatically be a command unit that is sent specifically to deal with that role of FSGs. And that was CU7.
And that was CU7?
Yeah.
Okay. So, just so I'm clear, CU8 wasn't the ICP, or never became the ICP.
I never made it the ICP, whether it was done after I left, because I moved on to CU7.
Yes.
I don't know.
I see. I was going to ask you about that. After you moved to CU7, after you personally moved to CU7, what use was made of CU8?
I'm afraid I don't know. I was wrapped up with the FSG information. I was most of the time on the mobile phone, so okay. I don't know.
Staying with page 4, looking at the third paragraph, and again we've looked at this a little bit before, but can I just ask you to look at halfway down that paragraph? You say, as the usual FSG recording methods were impractical, I had to improvise by noting the floor numbers, flat numbers and numbers of people and conditions. I then passed this information to Watch Manager Mark Kenfield via radio, highlighting the priority calls. Now, I think we've covered this in some details. In terms of priorities, were you the one who was doing the prioritisation?
I was passing on the information as I was given it. So if and like I say, I can't remember the specifics of any calls. If a flat was heavily smoke logged, I would be saying it's heavily smoke logged. If a room was lightly smoke logged, that was lightly smoke logged. It's I wouldn't be saying this is your priority, then that one, then that one, then that one. It's understood if the flat's got heavy smoke logging, that would be the priority over one with light smoke logging.
I see. Because when you say highlighting the priority calls,
stating the conditions within the flats.
Right, and were you expecting Mark Kenfield to do his own prioritisation on the basis of the information you were giving him? That
would be down to the incident commander or whoever the incident commander is delegated to oversee the committing of the crews.
Right, okay. And again, similar question to the one I asked earlier. In terms of priorities, do you know to whom Mark Kenfield passed the priority details?
No, I don't.
Okay. Was there a system in place, still at the time of CU8, before you moved to CU7, for ensuring that the results of any search and rescue mission, which were initiated in response to an FSG call that you were passing on, was being monitored?
Sorry, could you ask the question again?
Yeah, was there any system in place for ensuring that the results of a deployment in response to an FSG call that you had handled on CU8?
The feedback from committed crews?
Yes. Yeah.
No. and there wasn't any throughout the incident. Later in the incident, we were asking from the FSGCU, we were asking for feedback. We asked on a number of occasions. We weren't getting any, and all of us I believe all of us, I can only speak for myself, certainly I assumed that the reason why we weren't getting any feedback was because there wasn't the personnel, there wasn't the line of communications, there wasn't the physical space within the building to be able to deal with a second line of communication. The priority was to get the information out, get the crews committed, make sure they knew where they were going. As much as everybody would have wanted that line of communication to come back, it wasn't practical.
Right. Who were you asking for feedback?
We were discussing it between ourselves on the FSGCU. I was only dealing with receiving the information from control. I didn't pass any messages on to anybody else, and I'm afraid I couldn't say who was passing those messages on.
Can I, just on the subject of priorities, just go back a minute or two in your evidence and about how priorities were done. Can I ask you please to look at page 81 of the ORR? And this is a time mark of 015049. So just shortly after the passing to you of the bunch of information at 0143 that we saw and at 0150, which might be the same. Here at 015049, we see it records CRO Adams telephones the CU, believed to be CU8, and Watch Manager Meyrick answers the phone. CRO Adams relays the following FSG calls information: flat 133, floor 16, and flat 182, 21st floor. Just pausing there, that's a record of a telephone conversation. Does that help you recall at what time you started using the telephone?
That sounds about right. If we arrived at 0130, it was roughly 20 minutes later that we changed from receiving the information via the main scheme radio to the mobile.
Right. Now, earlier you said that the only person in the control room you spoke to by mobile was Jason Olive.
Yes, to the best of my memory. Obviously, this contradicts that.
It does.
And it may well be that I spoke to somebody else. To the best of my mind, I only remember speaking to one person, but it could have been... Because although I spent most of the night on the mobile, their calls were cut off every now and again, so we'd end a call and then there'd be another call. So it may be that if this was the first call or not, I spoke to somebody else, and I just assumed later that it had been the same person I'd been speaking to the whole time.
Right. Okay. But okay. And the next paragraph says, CU request an idea of priority from control, who confirm the following: 133, not too panicked, smoke coming in, told to block door. Flat 182, can't stop smoke coming through front door, so has moved to living room. CU ask if control can prioritise calls based on smoke density going forward. Do you remember doing that? Do you remember asking them to prioritise in that way? Yeah,
like I said earlier, a bit of... I do remember asking for clarification on levels of smoke, just so we could prioritise them. So I, again, just for me to clarify, it's not me asking control, which do we do first, which do we do second. If you can give us an idea of conditions, then we can know the order that we send people.
Right. So I'm clear. You wanted to prioritise, or rather you wanted to get information so that prioritisation could be done.
Yes.
And you asked control to give you details of conditions in flats.
So we could then prioritise.
So you could then prioritise. To the best of your recollection, did control then start passing on information based on smoke density or other things that allowed you to prioritise from that point?
Yeah. as I said earlier, that the main things that I can remember either being told or asking for were the flat numbers, the floor numbers, the numbers of adults and children, and the conditions within the flat.
Right. And looking down at this information that we've got there, is for those two particular flats, 13316, smoke coming in, and then for flat 182 on floor 21, can't stop smoke coming through front door, so have gone into living room. Was that enough information to allow you or Mark Kenfield to be able to prioritise?
No, not really, and I don't want to speak for control, but if that's the only information that they've been given, that's all that they can pass to us.
Yes. Did you at any stage tell control that that wasn't sufficient to allow you to make a proper prioritisation?
I can't remember, but like I've already said, we were trying to get an idea of conditions so that we could prioritise. So I would have thought that I would have, but I don't remember saying it in those exact words. Right.
Do you remember at any stage going back to control while you were on CU8 or indeed on CU7 and saying to them, we need better information about smoke, fire, heat in order to be able to prioritise? Certainly, as the incident progressed, that was becoming apparent from the information that they were passing to us. We weren't needing to ask, that we were being told. Almost with the very first set of information that was passed to me, that was when I'm pretty sure I did ask, can we have an idea on conditions? I wouldn't have said so we can prioritise. Oh, well, I may have done. I don't remember saying that, but right. I would have seen that as a given, that that's why I'm asking for conditions. Okay. From the time when Mark Kentfield left you on CU8, were you alone on CU8? Yeah. And that was until the CU7 personnel turned up? No. Or when did you stop being alone? Perhaps I can put it that way. I was alone, I'm pretty sure, until the first FSG started coming in, and then other people started coming onto the command unit, as they would do with any incident for a number of reasons, being very focused on trying to get that information recorded and passed on correctly. I wasn't taking a great deal of notice of who else was getting on. Okay. Let's just see if we can take this slowly. First of all, when roughly do you think you were joined by other personnel on CU8? After time-wise, I've no idea. I mean, from what you've shown me, it looks like it was 20 minutes from arrival to me taking FSG information via mobile for the first time, which sounds about right, but if you'd asked me for the figure, I would have said between 15 minutes and 30 minutes. Right. My timeline for the whole night is all over the place, as it was just in those first few minutes. Sure. People coming and going, I'm looking down at the desk that I'm sat at, recording that information. There's a couple of things that I do remember. I remember Group Manager Welsh getting on the CU. I think he asked me to make pumps 25. I'm sure he asked me to declare a major incident and to declare that he was now the IC. Apart from that, there's no specifics, certainly of times or orders of people getting onto the CU, because I was very much focused on recording that information. Right. And Welch joining you, was that on CU8 or, yes, or when you went to CU7? Yeah, this was CU8. Right. Okay. And the others joining you on CU8, can you identify them? Do you know who they were? The only other people that I know that got on are watch managers Peckham, Harrison, and I later find out that station manager Egan and I don't know what time group manager Goodall joined us, if he came on to CU8, right, and we all moved over together. They actually, because we all moved across as an FSG team, they moved across with all the information they had, and then I followed later. I think that was because I was
on the phone taking information at that point. So when I walked across on my own. They'd already gone across and started to utilise CU7 for FSG.
Right. Okay. Now, just to pick up in terms of time, what you just said a minute ago about Richard Welch coming to CU8. We have Richard Welch as status 3 at 1:57, and then if you go to the short incident log at page 21, you can see at 2:04:20, informative CU7, GM Welch now IC. Can you just explain that message for us?
No, I'm afraid I can't. I'm very sure I sent that from CU8.
And just above that, at 2:03:41, it says make up IUP G271 make pumps 25. Do you think that's correct? Do you recall that?
It may not have been. No. No, maybe I made it 40. Maybe I didn't make it up at all. I certainly remember sending a message that Group Manager Welsh was now the IC,
right.
And I'm pretty sure I remember sending major incident declared. I thought I sent a make-up as well, but that may be a false memory.
No. It may very well be that the reference to 25 should be a reference to 40.
It could be.
Because that's about the right time. But in terms of a make-up to a major incident or declaration, if you look down the page 21 to 020638, you can see make-up IUP CU8 from GM Welch. This is a major incident.
Yeah. I definitely did not go over to CU7 to declare Group Manager Welsh as the IC and then come back to CU8 to make it a major incident.
So we think a reference at 020420 to CU7, GM Welch now IC, is a mistake for CU8, which is consistent with 020638, major incident. Okay. And yeah. Right. Now, in terms of when you were on your own and before you were joined, do you think you were able to cope with the volume of FSG information coming through CU8?
Well, you can only record one thing at a time. They can only pass on one piece of information at a time. If there'd been more lines of communication, then the information would have been collected and passed on quicker. In terms of if I was able to cope, I'm very confident that I collected all the information and passed on all the information.
I suppose what I'm really asking you is, did you think at the time that you would have been better served and helped by having more people on CU8 with you to receive the FSG calls and pass them on?
If there'd been more people on the CU, like I say, only one person can be on the radio at a time, so one person would have been doing that. Yes, right. more people to help with collecting the information. I could have been on the main screen radio collecting the information. Somebody could have been on the handheld radio passing on that information. Yes, in that sense, it definitely would have made it a lot easier. Also, like I said earlier, there's multiple roles that the CU carries out. Somebody else, we could have done with a dozen people on the CU in those first few minutes, carrying out different roles.
Now, I just want to turn to the subject of FSG runners. In his contemporaneous notes, and I won't show them to you unless you want to see them, but Watch Manager Kentfield says that he got more people to act as runners for the passage of information from the FSG command unit. Do you remember runners coming to collect FSG information from the door of CU8?
I'm afraid I don't.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't have anything. Maybe I was just collecting it, giving it to somebody else who passed it on. I'm afraid I just don't remember running.
I was going to ask you, do you have a recollection of what happened to the pieces of paper on which you were writing the FSG
Well, like I say,
information?
I was recording information, speaking to Watch Manager Kentfield over the radio. As more people came onto the CU, I was passing the information on to them. I was just dealing with collecting the information.
Right, I see. Do you remember when a system of giving FSG information to runners started, or rather, did it start when you were based in CU8?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember it starting at all?
No.
Okay. Do you remember whether any runners would come back and provide you in CU8 or indeed CU7 with information that they were getting from the fireground?
As I said earlier, I don't remember any information coming back from the fireground regarding committed crews to FSGs.
Yeah. So as far as you were concerned, throughout your involvement, all the FSG information was one way, was it?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Was there a system for keeping track of what information that had been passed to the runners, which Mr. Kentfield refers to?
Yes, all information that was collected was recorded as well as being passed on.
Where was it recorded?
On paperwork, on whiteboards, across CU8 to start with and then CU7 afterwards.
Okay, well, we're going to look at those shortly. Was there any, you may have answered this question before, but let me ask it again, because it's a slightly different question, but was there any system in place for you to keep track of what action had been taken in relation to the FSG messages that were coming out of CU8?
Sorry, were we keeping track of what we had recorded?
No, were you keeping track of what action had been taken in response to the FSG?
So whether crews had been committed or
yes.
not? No, like I said, it was a one-way line of communication. Right. We weren't getting information back.
So it's the same answer. Right.
Yeah, speculation now. There may have been feedback on a couple of specific rescues, but no, I was just consumed with collecting the information, so I'm afraid that's just guesswork.
Okay. Now, coming back to your statement at page 4, you you say in the second last paragraph on that page that at approximately 2 o'clock, CU7 arrived from Wembley with watch manager Norman Harrison and watch manager Tony Peckham, along with group manager Tom Goodall and station manager Dan Egan. Now, just in terms of times, I don't think we've got a recorded status 3 for CU7, arrival, but we do have their status 2, mobile to incident, at 1:23:15. So that would mean it would take them 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes to get from Wembley to Grenfell Tower. Would that be about right?
It could be, because it's not just the time it takes you to drive there. I don't know what the pumps would be made at that point, but clearly there was a lot of machines around, and then they've got to find the ICP when they get there. So when I put down 2 hours, that's an estimate, well, approximately. Yeah. I certainly don't know for definite what exact time they arrived.
No. Now, that's helpful. Now, you then say in that same paragraph, they began assisting me collecting the FSG information. And I think you've answered this already, but they started off, did they, by coming to CU8? So they parked CU7 and then came to CU8 to see you, as it were. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And you then say, by this time we'd stopped using the radio. I was receiving FSG information from the officer of the day, station manager Olive via the brigade mobile. And that's by the time CU7 arrived, is it? So we've got a time mark.
It was. They were near enough the same time.
Right.
To be honest, I don't know which happened first, whether they arrived and then I went onto the mobile, or whether it was the other way around.
Okay. And so do you remember how long you'd been using the mobile for to communicate with control prior to the arrival of CU7?
No.
Okay. Now, we've got records of radio messages continuing to go from control to CU8, even after 2 o'clock. If I can just show you, going back to the short incident log at page 21. We looked at these earlier, but I just want to pick these up with you. For example, at 02:05:55, this is page 21 of the short incident log, tab 23 of the documents bundle. We have 02:05:55, service request completed, RT4 to CU8, 2 persons trapped in flat 174 on 10th floor level. And then again at 02:06:06, service request created, RT4 to CU8, further call, times 2 adults and 1 child trapped inside flat 82 on floor 11. So there's just 2 examples of how after 2 a.m. we're still getting radio calls on RT4 to CU8. Is that as you recall it?
It could be. It could be after that time that well, you've got previous documentation that shows I was on the mobile before then.
Exactly.
I don't remember. I remember being on the radio and then going on to the mobile. I don't remember being backwards and forwards between the two.
Right. Now, I mean, looking at that and looking at the fact that we've also got messages by mobile, which we've been looking at as well. Do you remember having 2 methods of communication with control, one via RT4 and one via the brigade mobile?
Not at the same time. It was one, as I remember, it was one then the other.
Right. But looking at this document, that would suggest otherwise.
Yes.
I see. Right. And having looked at this document, which suggests otherwise, how do you remember it?
No, I still remember it the same way.
Okay. Were you, even though you were using the brigade mobile while still on CU8, were you continuing to monitor RT4?
Yes.
Okay. And what could you hear on RT4?
I don't remember hearing anything. I suppose this goes back to what I was saying earlier about any further FSG information. I'm sure I would have heard it. I'm sure I would have been aware of it. That said, because of the importance of FSG information, when that was being passed over the mobile, I would have been very focused on getting that information right and passing it on correctly. So with that said, there is a possibility that messages could have been passed via the main scheme, but I'm sure at least I would have heard the noise of it, even if I couldn't pick up what the message was.
Right.
And I don't remember that happening.
Don't remember that happening. Do you remember whether you were writing down messages which you were collecting over the mobile from control room and not collecting information that was coming at the same time over RT4, the radio?
Like I say, there is a possibility, but I'm sure I would have at least been aware of it.
Right. And if you had been aware of it, what would you have done? Would you have gone back to control by mobile and said, I heard a message over RT4, could you repeat it?
Yeah, and I'd just be very surprised that they're sending FSG via 2 lines of communication to 2 different sources as well.
Coming to that. Yes. When you switched from communicating with control by radio to communicating with control by mobile, was there any change in how the information coming in from control was recorded by you?
As I referred to earlier, communication over the main scheme radio tends to be fairly formal. Mobile conversation is just a regular conversation. In many ways, it's a lot easier to pass information via a mobile. So the passing of information would have been easier over the mobile phone.
Yes.
The details of it, flat number, floor, the rest of it, would have been the same.
And would you have recorded it in the same way
Yes.
as you had when you were on
Yes.
the radio? Okay. Now, you say in
Sorry, just to stop you there. At that point I would have. It did change later when we went on to CU7.
I'm about to come to that, absolutely. I understand. Just on that then, in the... in the second last paragraph, you list the people who joined you on CU8. We've been through that. Harrison, Peckham, Goodall and Egan. Did they all come at once as a group of 4?
I doubt very much they would have done.
Do you remember how they arrived?
Watch managers Harrison and Peckham came on the same machine, so they likely would have come on at the same time, but
Yes.
not necessarily. One could have been parking the machine while the other came to us. So I don't know.
Okay. And do you remember whether Mr. Goodall, station manager Goodall, sorry, group manager Goodall, arrived later?
No, it was again, as I said earlier, certainly watch managers Peckham and Harrison moved across to Charlie Uniform 7. I then later went across, and it was from there, group manager Goodall, it was apparent that he was the FSG coordinator, so in charge of the FSG command unit. And we realised, we was told, this is the team that we've got, we're all going to be working on the FSGs, and that's when we established that. So,
right.
Yeah, they went across, and I can't remember exactly when station manager Egan or group manager Goodall came onto the CU and when they moved across, but I'm pretty sure they were on CU7 by the time I got on there.
Right. Station manager Egan said that group manager Goodall took over about 45 minutes after he did, once they were, or once you were all on CU7.
Right.
Is that how you remember it?
Certainly he took over on CU7, yeah.
Okay. But about that period of time after
When, sorry?
After Egan had been on CU7.
Difficult to say. To the best of my memory, I'd not been on CU7 that long when it was apparent that Group Manager Goodall was in charge of us.
Right.
Again, I'll have to point out that for the majority of this time, I was on the mobile phone collecting information, and I just been very focused on that. There were things happening around me that I was not taking any notice of.
When Norman Harrison arrived with Tony Peckham, do you remember whether he told you, and indeed everybody else present in CU8, that he thought the advice being given out to control operators, to callers, needed to be changed?
No, that's not a conversation I had with anybody at that time.
Right. You don't remember Mr. Harrison saying anything like that?
No.
Okay. Do you remember any discussion about the need to change the advice that control room operators were giving callers before you left CU8 to go to CU7?
There's certainly, when you say discussion, it sounds like you're saying, did we all have a conversation between ourselves? And there certainly wasn't the time for that. Things may have said between certain individuals. I don't remember having a conversation like that with anybody. We were all being given a designated role, so we tend not to speculate. You do think about other things that are going on in the job, but you're very much focused on what your role is within that job and concentrating on getting that done properly.
Right. Do you recall hearing anybody, Harrison or anybody else, saying that they thought the advice being given out by control room operators to 999 callers should be changed?
No.
Okay. Do you remember Mr. Egan being asked to take over the management of FSG calls?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
Do you remember anything about... well, let me ask it this way. Do you remember a station manager called Brett Loft?
No, I know the name Brett Loft, but no, I don't remember his involvement at the incident.
Right, so you don't remember having anything to do with him about FSG calls?
No.
Right. And when, just going back to your statement, in the penultimate paragraph, you say, in the second line, they began assisting me collecting the FSG information. That was on CU8, was it, at that point?
At that point, yes.
Right. And what system did they adopt when they began assisting you?
I don't know. I was recording information myself, and I was passing it on to them.
What were they doing?
I don't know. I don't know. I was just passing it on to them, and then I was focusing on the next call that was coming through.
Okay. So just to be clear, when you say they began assisting me, what did they do to assist you?
I was passing the information on to them.
Do you know?
I believe they were recording it on the whiteboard.
Right.
But in what format, I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of whiteboards, can you help me with this? Do you remember whether the whiteboards, or the whiteboard and grid system, was implemented on CU8?
No, CU7.
It was CU7. Okay. So at this stage, on CU8, they were recording. What were they doing with the information that you were recording?
To the best of my memory, they were just writing out in a similar way as I was on the paper. But all I knew was I was aware of them writing the information out. I wasn't observing how they were writing it out.
And did you observe what they did with the information?
No.
Okay.
No, again, I was consumed with recording the information I was being given either over the radio or over the mobile phone.
Yes. And do you remember whether any of those others, while on CU8, Harrison, Peckham, Good, and if so, Egan and Goodall, do you remember whether they took calls or radio messages themselves from control?
I'm very sure they didn't.
So the only person taking calls or radio messages from control on CU8 was you, is that?
Yes.
Is that right? Right. Now, if you go back to the short incident log, please, at page 21, tab 23 of the documents bundle, we've got a rough time of arrival of CU7 of about 2 o'clock. And if you turn to page 22, and I'll come back to this in a moment, but halfway down page 22, you can see next to the time mark of 02:23:33, it says CU7 run all FSG calls via CU7. Do you remember that? Roughly that time, that message coming through.
Sorry, Mr. Meyrick, which message are we looking at?
2:23:33, Mr. Chairman. It should be highlighted.
It is now.
Sorry, I hadn't noticed that it hadn't been highlighted.
It's just the wrong one.
Right. Yes. So it says key CU7 run all FSG calls via CU7.
Yeah, I don't remember it
that?
specifically, but
Right.
it would have done as a matter of course.
Right. Now, so do you know why that message was sent only at that stage and not immediately CU7 arrived at about 2 o'clock? If that's the right time of arrival.
Because it takes time for these things to be, the jobs to be delegated, and then to establish. First of all, you've got to collect the information from CU8 first of all, before moving over. And going back to what I said earlier, it's often the case that the initial command unit takes over as the FSG command unit. So with everything that was going on, it may just take a little bit of time to establish CU7 is what we're going to use, transfer all the information over, and then once we're ready on CU7 for that to take over, and this is probably comes back to why I was the last person to move over there, because I was the one receiving the information. Once we're ready, then we'll send a message to control to say CU7 is now the FSG command unit.
Yes, I follow. And just to continue on a bit of a similar theme that we looked at before, if you look at the bottom of page 21, and please have highlighted, first of all, 020908. This is the page before, still within the incident, short incident log. 020908. That says service request created RT4 to G271, fire in corridor, floor 12, caller trapped, flat 95. And then again the same message at 021021, 2 entries below that. It looks as if at that time, 0209 and 0210, FSG messages were still being sent by radio, RT4, to G271. Do you remember that was happening?
As I said, no. I mean, and the message in between those two messages is to CU8.
Exactly.
No, I have no idea where that would be.
It looks from that, you're absolutely right, there's a sandwich, G271, CU8, G271, same message, that 2 separate FSG messages were being sent by RT4, more or less simultaneously, one to G271 and one to CU8. Do you remember that happening?
No. Just to point out the times, the second message there, the one in the middle,
yeah.
021009, you've then got 12 seconds later the message being sent to Golf 271.
Yes.
It would take more than 12 seconds for control to send that middle message to CU8, have that information confirmed, and then come back to Golf 271 with a further call.
So what does that tell us?
It seemed your speculation is as good as mine on that one, I'm afraid.
Right. Right, okay. That's something we'll have to pursue with somebody else, I suspect. My question, I think, was simply, though, whether you were aware at the time,
I wasn't aware of it, no.
after CU7 had arrived, that nonetheless messages were still being sent both to CU8 and to G271.
No, like I say, as far as I was aware, all the calls were coming to me.
Right. Now, at the bottom of page 4 of your statement, you say, I remained on the phone for some time as the information was coming pretty quickly. At some time we were instructed to use CU7 as the FSG command unit. I would say it was around 20 to 30 minutes of our arrival. We physically moved from CU8 to onto CU7. At this stage, CU8 remained as ICP. Now, just to be clear on timings, we've got your arrival, CU8's arrival, at about 1:30. We looked at that earlier. And you told us you thought that CU7 arrived at about 2 o'clock. So when you say here that you were moved to CU7 around 20 to 30 minutes after your arrival, of our arrival, do you mean 20 to 30 minutes after CU7's arrival or after CU8's arrival?
Well, looking at it now and knowing the timelines that I know now, it was more like 20 to 30 minutes after the arrival of CU7.
Okay. So around 2:30 a.m.
Yeah. As I've said before, my timeline for that night is all over the place. So it doesn't surprise me that you show me that it was 23 minutes past 2 or whatever it was.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. But does that help your recollection, or are you still?
It puts a figure, puts a time on it, which I wouldn't have been able to remember.
Right. Okay. Now, do you remember where CU7 was located?
Yes.
Where?
Grenfell Road.
Grenfell Road. Was that closer to the tower than CU8?
Yes.
It was. Do you remember how it was able to get closer to Grenfell Tower than CU8, even though it arrived half an hour or so later than CU8?
Well, as I was on the back of CU8 at the time, I can only guess. The road was clear enough for them to drive down, and it was the first space they saw.
Right.
The reason I didn't get any closer on CU8 is because there were so many people all over the place, and I found a convenient space. We tried to leave entry and exit routes for ambulance, usually for ambulance service, and I didn't want to go down the road, find there was no spaces, and block the road off completely. So that's why I parked on the junction of Bowmore Road.
Right. Now, after the move to CU7, and you're right, Gabe, to take 022333, because that's what's in the short incident log at page 22. Can I just ask you, did CU8 continue thereafter to receive FSG calls, to your recollection?
All FSG calls that I'm aware of came to CU8 early on, and when I moved across to CU7, no more calls went to CU8 that I know of.
Right.
I was collecting all the information. I took the mobile phone across with me, and that was this is what it was. CU8's mobile phone that I had on CU7, so all the calls were coming into that. But so no more. Once I started on the mobile phone, I wasn't taking any more calls on the main scheme radio. So when I moved across, Control kept that same line of communication, that same mobile phone.
Okay, then can I just ask you, if you look, please, first of all, at short incident log page 22, and then we'll look onto the next page as well, and the page after that. We have calls still running RT4 to CU8 with FSG calls look at the bottom of page 22, at 0227, and then if you look at page 23, I'll take it a bit more slowly, 022748. And you can then continue on this page that we've got up on the screen. You'll see 0229, RT4 to CU8, and then 0238, 0240, 11, RT4 to CU8, caller states fire is now in flat 152, and then the next entry, 241, 27, update RT4 CU8, and so on. And then even as late as 031051 on page 24 of the short incident log, 031051, so it's a bit lower down. No, it's 0310, yes, 031051, service request completed, CU8 RT4, persons in flat 153. So it looks as if, as late as 3:10, so something 40 minutes after you thought you moved across to CU7, CU8 was still getting fire survival guidance messages via the radio.
If that's what that means, then yes, and I have no knowledge of that happening.
Right. Who was operating or running CU8 after you moved to CU7? Do you know?
I'm afraid I don't know. I know at some point Mark Kentfield went back on to CU8, but I don't think he was back on it by the time I left.
Okay. How long do you think it took you physically to move from CU8 to CU7?
A minute or two.
Right. And what did you need to take with you? I think you mentioned earlier pieces of paper.
Yeah.
What else did you take?
Yeah, the mobile phone, and I think that was it.
Right. What about whiteboards or?
I didn't take any whiteboards. Whiteboards may have been taken across. I'm not sure.
Now, at the top of page 5 of your statement, you say that Group Manager Goodall and Station Manager Egan had by now established communications with the bridgehead to pass on the FSG information. I'll just pause there. Can you explain what that system was that they had established?
No, I'm afraid I can't.
How did you know that Group Manager Goodall and Station Manager Regan had established communications with the
Because
bridgehead?
I was collecting the information of the calls, I was passing it to them, and they were passing it on. I know runners were used, I know radios were used, but in what way, it
Right.
wouldn't be fair for me to elaborate on.
And once, this is once you were on CU7, is it?
Yes.
And once you were on CU7, how were you collecting the information and recording it?
Oh, it's still on the mobile phone. On the
Right.
mobile phones, certainly as soon as the grid was created, that was how it was being recorded by myself. I was physically writing on that board. The control information pad was then being used for every caller, I believe, and so I was passing the information on to watch managers Harrison and Peckham.
Right. Just to focus again on what you say in your statement, you say Group Manager Goodall and Station Manager Egan had by now established communications with the bridgehead. Let me just take it in stages. What do you mean by now?
As far as I was aware, by the time we got onto CU7, they'd established a chain of communication to the bridgehead.
Okay, now...
So this line of communication, whether it was through them, through watch managers Harrison and Peckham, I'm not sure, but there was already a line of communication from me passing the information to watch manager Kempfield. When I was then receiving help on CU8, other people were then passing on the information. I wasn't asking how they were passing it on. It wasn't a need-to-know basis for me. It was a need-to-know, but I didn't need to know it. So we already had that link before we moved on to CU7.
Yes.
When we got on to CU7, as far as I'm aware, that passage of information just continued. If it changed in some way, it may have done. I wouldn't have been aware. I was just dealing with collecting the information and then passing it on to my team.
Okay. Right. So you can't help us, I think, in expanding further on what the system of communications was with the bridgehead.
No, I'm afraid not.
Goodall and Egan established. Right. In terms of recording the FSG information coming to you, I think you say you were still receiving it on the brigade mobile. Mm-hmm. And was that coming... that was coming from the control room from Jason Olive, was
yes.
it? Okay. And once you got into CU7, did you start recording that information?
Yes.
On what?
Eventually onto the grid system that you referred to earlier.
We'll look at that shortly. But just at the very start of your stay on CU7, what were you doing to record the information?
In all honesty, I can't remember exactly how I was recording it, whether I was still writing it down in the same way I had been on CU8, or whether I was just passing the information directly to other people within the team, and they were writing it on the whiteboards or the information control information pad. I'm afraid I can't remember that period of time.
Right. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I've got a few more questions, and
yes.
I wouldn't say to change topic completely, but to take a slightly different line within the same topic. Is that a convenient moment?
Well, it could be.
It is to me. Is it to you? Is it to the witness?
Well, you'd probably quite like a break now, wouldn't you?
I'll go along with whatever.
Very accommodating, yes. Thank you very much. Well,
we're making very good progress.
if we were to break for lunch now, can you give us any idea of how long you might need the witness after lunch?
It would only be an idea, but not more than an hour.
Well, he might derive some encouragement from that.
He might.
All right. I think then we can probably afford to break until 2 o'clock, can we?
Yes, we can.
So a slightly longer.
Yes, we can.
Right. Well, Mr. Meyrick, we'll have a break now. You can have a chance to get some lunch. We'll start again at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
And please don't talk about your evidence or anything to do with it over the break.
Okay.
All right. See you at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. Thank you. 2 o'clock now, please. Thank you.